Lockheed Martin wins $105 million deal to run GPS ground control. Every precision strike, every navigation-guided munition, and every soldier's handheld GPS unit ultimately depends on a network of ground stations most Americans will never see, and the Space Force just handed Lockheed Martin $105 million to keep that invisible backbone working for the next generation of GPS satellites. The contract, awarded July 7th, covers modifications to what the military calls the GPS control segment, the ground-based system of antennas, computers, and monitoring stations that actually commands and tracks GPS satellites in orbit, giving operators the ability to upload software updates, adjust satellite positioning, and manage the constellation's health from the ground rather than simply receiving signals passively from space. The satellites themselves are only one piece of how GPS actually functions, alongside the ground control system that commands them and the receiver equipment that end users, from smartphones to guided missiles, rely on to calculate position and time. For over a decade, the Pentagon's plan for controlling its newest GPS satellite centered on a program called the Next Generation Operational Control System, known as OCX, awarded to Raytheon, now part of RTX, back in 2010 with an original price tag under $4 billion. That program spiraled badly, with costs eventually approaching $8 billion and delivery slipping roughly a decade behind schedule, and Pentagon officials formally canceled OCX on April 17, 2026, after concluding the system could not deliver the capabilities the GPS constellation needed on any operationally relevant timeline. With OCX dead, the Space Force turned instead to a system it had already been quietly modernizing as a fallback for years, called the Architecture Evolution Plan, or AEP, a ground control system Lockheed Martin has steadily upgraded over roughly the past decade, even while OCX was supposed to be the eventual replacement. That earlier investment in AEP is exactly why Lockheed Martin, rather than RTX, is now positioned to control the newest generation of GPS satellites going forward. Since AEP already works and has a track record commanding the current GPS constellation, while OCX never reached operational status despite years of additional funding poured into fixing it. This new task order specifically extends AEP's capabilities to handle GPS IIIF, short for GPS III follow-on, the next major batch of navigation satellites the Space Force plans to launch starting in 2027. GPS IIIF satellites represent a significant technical leap over the current GPS III generation already in orbit, featuring a fully digital navigation payload built by L3 Harris that improves accuracy and signal strength, along with a more resilient satellite chassis called the LM-2100 Combat Bus designed specifically to withstand cyberattacks better than earlier satellite designs. Lockheed Martin has been building the GPS IIIF satellites themselves under a separate manufacturing contract worth up to $7.2 billion first awarded in 2018, meaning the company that builds these satellites is now also the company responsible for commanding them from the ground, a level of vertical integration that stands in contrast to the original plan, which had RTX handling ground control for satellites Lockheed Martin manufactured. The work covered under this specific task order focuses narrowly on getting new satellites safely into their operational positions rather than running the full GPS constellation day-to-day. According to the Space Force's contract announcement, the agreement provides command and control capabilities specifically to support launch, early orbit, and disposal operations for the GPS IIIF spacecraft, the critical early window when a satellite first reaches orbit and needs precise ground guidance to reach its intended position, along with the eventual process of safely retiring a satellite once its operational life ends. Lockheed Martin will perform the work in Colorado Springs, Colorado, home to Space Systems Command's Peterson Space Force Base and a longtime hub for American GPS ground operations, with the task order expected to run through December 31, 2030. The Space Force structured the deal as a sole source acquisition, meaning the contract went directly to Lockheed Martin without a competitive bidding process open to other companies. That approach makes practical sense given the circumstances, since Lockheed Martin already owns deep institutional knowledge of both the AEP ground system and the GPS IIIF satellites it is simultaneously building, expertise that would be difficult and time-consuming for a rival contractor to replicate from scratch, particularly with GPS IIIF launches already approaching in 2027. The Space Force has obligated just over $10 million in fiscal year 2026 research, development, test, and evaluation funding to begin the work now, a portion of the full $105 million ceiling that will be spent as the contract progresses toward its 2030 completion date. Why any of this matters beyond the contracting details comes down to what GPS actually underpins for both civilian life and military operations. The system provides positioning, navigation, and timing data, commonly shortened to PNT, that keeps everything from bank transaction timestamps to power grid synchronization running accurately, while simultaneously guiding precision munitions, coordinating military logistics, and supporting navigation for aircraft, ships, and ground vehicles across every branch of the armed forces. A ground control system that cannot reliably command new satellites threatens the entire chain, regardless of how sophisticated the satellites themselves become, which is precisely why the Space Force's decision to lean on a working legacy system rather than wait indefinitely for a more ambitious replacement reflects a broader lesson the Pentagon has learned the hard way across multiple troubled space acquisition programs. A system that actually works beats a system that promises more but cannot deliver on any predictable timeline.